Captain Dongwoo Kim stood on the bridge of the human starship New Seoul, watching the strange alien ships approach. They looked like giant metal insects with wings that glowed blue in the darkness of space. His crew was nervous. This was humanity's first meeting with aliens, and nobody knew what to expect. "Captain," said Lieutenant Boram at the communication station, "they're sending us a message." The main screen filled with text in dozens of languages. Dongwoo's translation computer worked quickly to make sense of it. The message was clear. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Etherian space. Power down all weapons immediately. Prepare for processing according to Sacred Protocol 1 Alpha. Resistance is forbidden." Dongwoo read the message twice, then he laughed. "Sir?" asked his first officer, Commander Tae-min. "They want us to turn off our weapons and let them do whatever they want to us," Dongwoo said. "Have they met humans before?" Dr. Hai-Jin Park, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from her console. "Captain, maybe we should follow their rules. We don't want to start a war on our first day meeting aliens." Dongwoo shook his head. "Doctor, my grandfather taught me something important. He said that when someone demands you make yourself helpless, that's exactly when you shouldn't do it." The alien ships were getting closer. Dongwoo could see they had weapons too, but they weren't pointing them at the New Seoul. They seemed to expect humans to just give up without a fight. "Open a channel," Dongwoo ordered. "Channel open, sir." Dongwoo spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is Captain Dongwoo Kim of the human ship New Seoul. We're explorers, not enemies. We'd like to meet you properly. Would you like to come aboard our ship for dinner?" There was a long silence. Then the alien ship stopped moving. "Captain," Boram said, "they're sending another message. It says they don't understand what we mean by dinner." Dr. Hee-jin smiled. "Captain, I think we just confused them. Their protocols probably don't include social meals." "Good," Dongwoo said. "Send them this message. Dinner is when people eat food together and talk. It's how humans get to know each other. You can keep your weapons if it makes you feel safe." On the alien flagship, Ambassador Velthari stared at the human message. In her 400 years of life, she had never encountered anything like this. Every species they had ever met followed the sacred protocols. First contact always went the same way. Power down weapons, submit to scanning, answer questions, receive permission to exist in galactic space. But these humans were inviting them to eat food together. They were treating first contact like a social meeting between friends. "What do we do?" asked her aide, a younger Etherian named Kilvash. Velthari looked at the sacred protocol manual. It was 3,000 pages long and covered every possible situation, except this one. There was no rule about aliens inviting you to dinner. "Contact the High Arbiter," she said finally. High Arbiter Crix was a being made of living crystal who had enforced galactic law for 800 years. When Velthari's message reached the council station, Crix studied it carefully. "These humans refuse to follow protocol?" Crix asked. "Not exactly, Your Honor," Velthari replied. "They didn't say no. They just ignored the protocols completely. They're acting like we're guests instead of enforcers." Crix had never heard of such a thing. "Are they showing hostility?" "No, sir. They're being very polite. They keep asking if we want to try something called Korean barbecue." "What is that?" "I don't know, sir. It seems to be food that they cook and share." Crix thought for a long moment. The sacred protocols existed to maintain order in the galaxy. Every species had followed them for 10,000 years, but the protocols had never been challenged by simple kindness before. "Ambassador Velthari," Crix said finally, "investigate these humans. Learn what they want, but follow safety protocols. If they are dangerous, retreat immediately." Back on the New Seoul, Dongwoo was setting up the main dining room. Dr. Hee-jin had brought out her best Korean dishes from the ship's stores. The smell of kimchi and bulgogi filled the air. "Captain," Dr. Hyojin said, "are you sure this is a good idea? What if they try to poison us?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Dongwoo replied. "But I think they're just scared. When people are scared, the best thing you can do is show them you're not a threat." 3 hours later, Ambassador Velthari and 2 of her guards materialized in the new Soul's transporter room. They looked like giant praying mantises, but with intelligence in their large compound eyes. Dr. Hyejin greeted them with a bow. "Welcome aboard our ship. I'm Dr. Hyejin Park. Thank you for accepting our invitation." Velthari's translator worked to understand the words. "We have come to investigate your intentions," she said. "This is not normal procedure." "I know," Dr. Hyejin said with a smile. "But normal doesn't always mean good, does it?" They walked to the dining room, where Captain Dongwu was waiting. He stood and bowed respectfully when they entered. "Ambassador, thank you for joining us. Please sit wherever you're comfortable." Velthari had never been thanked by an alien before. In all her years of first contact missions, new species either feared the Council or tried to bargain with it. None had ever said thank you for showing up. The meal was strange for everyone. The Etherians had to adjust their eating habits to try human food, while the humans watched their guests carefully for signs of distress. But slowly, conversation began. "Your ship is very different from ours," Velthari observed. "How so?" Dr. Hyejin asked. "It feels warm, comfortable. Our ships are efficient, but yours feels like a home." Dongwu nodded. "That's intentional. We spend months in space. If the ship doesn't feel like home, the crew gets sad and doesn't work well." "Your crew's emotions affect their work performance?" Velthari was surprised. "In our fleet, emotions are controlled through discipline." "That sounds lonely," Dr. Hyejin said gently. Velthari paused. She had never thought of it as lonely before. It was just the way things were done. As the evening continued, the Etherians learned about human culture. They heard about families and friends, about art and music, about the way humans celebrated and mourned together. In return, they shared stories about their own people, though they admitted they had fewer stories about joy and more about duty. "Ambassador," Dongwu said as the meal ended, "we know we didn't follow your protocols today, but we're not trying to cause trouble. We just want to explore the galaxy and meet new friends." "Friends?" Velthari asked. "You wish to be friends with the Galactic Council?" "Why not?" Dr. Hyejin said. "Friends help each other. They share knowledge and support each other when times are hard. Isn't that better than just following rules?" After the Etherians left, Velthari found herself thinking about the humans' words. She had never questioned the sacred protocols before. They existed to maintain order and prevent conflict. But she had just spent 4 hours with aliens who seemed more interested in building relationships than following rules. Her report to High Arbiter Crix was unusual. "The humans are not hostile," she wrote. "They appear to operate on principles of social connection rather than legal compliance. They showed respect for our customs while sharing their own. Their approach to first contact prioritizes mutual understanding over procedural adherence. They seem to believe that personal relationships are more important than institutional protocols. This is either naive or revolutionary. I recommend further study." When High Arbiter Crix read the report, the crystal being felt something unusual: uncertainty. In 800 years of enforcing galactic law, every situation had fit into established categories. But these humans didn't fit anywhere. They weren't conquerors seeking power. They weren't merchants seeking profit. They weren't refugees seeking protection. They were explorers seeking friendship. Crix called an emergency session of the Council's First Contact Committee. 12 species gathered in the Great Crystal Chamber to discuss the human problem. "They invited our ambassador to dinner," Crix announced. The committee members looked at each other in confusion. "Is that a threat?" asked Councillor Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. "Is it a ritual?" wondered Representative Thulmain of the Oceanic Alliance. "It appears to be neither," Crix replied. "It appears to be an invitation to build a friendship." The committee spent 6 hours debating what to do about humans who treated first contact like a social gathering. They had laws covering every type of alien encounter except this one. Finally, Councillor Mireth of the Ancient Texts spoke up. "Perhaps," she said slowly, The question is not what to do about the humans. Perhaps the question is whether our protocols still serve their purpose. Diao. Chamber fell silent. In 10,000 years, no one had ever questioned the sacred protocols. But now, after meeting humans who offered friendship instead of following rules, some council members began to wonder, what if there was a better way? That night, as the new Sol continued its journey through space, Captain Dongwu made a note in his log. First contact successful. Made 3 new friends. Accidentally started a revolution in galactic thinking. Tomorrow we explore the next solar system. Dr. Hiejin looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity had just taken its first step into a larger universe, and they had done it by being themselves, curious, friendly, and completely unwilling to follow rules that didn't make sense. The galaxy would never be the same. Jae-sung Lee stood in the middle of what used to be an empty space station, watching humans and aliens work together to set up market stalls. 6 months ago, this place had been a forgotten refueling depot on the edge of nowhere. Now it was becoming the busiest trading hub in 3 sectors. Mr. Lee called So Young Choi, running over with a datapad in her hands. The Rillan traders just arrived with that spice shipment, but they're asking why we don't charge them the standard docking fees. Jae-sung smiled. Before becoming humanity's trade coordinator, he had run a small market in Seoul. His grandmother had taught him the most important rule of business. Treat your customers well, and they'll bring their friends. Tell them the first 3 docks are free for new traders, he said. After that, they pay what they think is fair. So Young looked confused. Sir, that's not how galactic trade works. There are standard fees set by the Commerce Council. Every station charges the same rates. And how's that working out? Jae-sung asked, pointing to the mostly empty stations they could see in the distance. Those stations follow all the rules perfectly. That's why they're dying. The galaxy had been using the same trade system for 5,000 years. Every species had assigned territories where they could sell specific goods. Trade routes were fixed and couldn't be changed without years of paperwork. Prices were set by the Commerce Council and reviewed every 10 years whether they needed it or not. It was stable, predictable, and completely inefficient. When humans first tried to register as traders, they had to fill out forms that were longer than most books. The process was supposed to take 3 years. Jae-sung had looked at the forms, laughed, and decided to skip them entirely. Instead, he had found this abandoned station and sent out a simple message. New market opening. Fair prices, good service, all species welcome. Come see what we have. The first alien to arrive was a small, nervous creature named Pip from a species called the Keltari. His people made beautiful art, but they weren't allowed to sell it outside their home system because they couldn't afford the licensing fees. How much to set up a stall? Pip had asked. What can you afford? Jae-sung had replied. I don't have much money. Then pay me in art. I like pretty things. Pip had stared at him. You'll take art instead of money? Why not? Money is just a way to trade for things you want. I want art. You want customers. Let's make a deal. Word spread quickly through the underground networks that smaller species used to communicate. Soon, traders who had never been able to afford official markets were coming to the human station. They brought goods that the big trading houses had never seen. Unique foods, rare minerals, beautiful crafts, and innovative technologies. But not everyone was happy about this. Merchant Prince Zalgotha controlled the trade routes in this sector. For 300 years, his family had made enormous profits by controlling who could trade what and where. When he heard about the human market, he sent his personal ship to investigate. Zalgotha was a Vorthon, a species that looked like massive bears covered in golden fur. They were proud, traditional, and very good at making money the old-fashioned way, by making sure no one else could compete with them. When his ship arrived at the human station, Zalgotha couldn't believe what he saw. Dozens of species were trading freely without permits, without paying tribute to anyone. Worse, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. This is illegal, he announced to Jae-sung when they met in the station's main corridor. According to who? Jae-sung asked politely. According to the galactic trade codes, You can't just set up a market wherever you want. There are procedures, regulations, territorial agreements. Jae-sung nodded thoughtfully. I read those codes. Very interesting. Did you know that most of them were written by people who wanted to keep competition away? Of course they were. That's how trade works. Order, stability, proper channels. And how's that working for everyone? Jae-sung gestured around the station. Look at these traders. Most of them couldn't afford to do business under your system. Now they're prospering. Zalgotha looked around. He had to admit the small traders did seem happy, but that wasn't the point. The system exists for good reasons. Without regulation, there would be chaos. Would there? So Young appeared beside them, carrying a tablet full of data. Our market has been open for 6 months. Want to see the numbers? Before Zalgotha could object, she was showing him charts and graphs. Crime, down 60% compared to regulated stations. Customer satisfaction, up 90%. Trade disputes, almost zero. Profit margins for small traders, up 300%. That's impossible, Zalgotha said. It's easy when you focus on helping people instead of controlling them, Jae-sung explained. Happy customers come back. Happy traders work harder. Happy partners recommend you to their friends. But the territorial agreements are suggestions, So Young interrupted. We checked. There's no law that says traders have to use specific routes. That's just how it's always been done. Zalgotha felt a headache coming on. You can't just ignore thousands of years of tradition. We're not ignoring it, Jae-sung said. We're improving it. At that moment, a small Kelthari trader named Yuki ran up to them. Mr. Lee, the Draknari just placed a huge order for Kelthari. Wind chimes, they want to put them in all their hotels. Jae-sung smiled at Yuki. That's wonderful. Did you quote them a good price? Yes, sir. And they're paying in Draknari crystals, which the Reelan want for their jewelry. After Yuki left, Zalgotha stared at Jae-sung. The Draknari don't do business with the Kelthari. Their species have a trade embargo that's lasted for 200 years. Had an embargo, So Young corrected. Turns out it started because of a paperwork error. Nobody wanted to admit they'd made a mistake, so they just kept pretending to hate each other. We introduced them properly, Jae-sung added. Turns out they actually like each other. This was exactly what Zalgotha had been afraid of. If small species started trading directly with each other, they wouldn't need the big trading houses anymore. His entire business model depended on controlling the flow of goods between species. I'm going to report this to the Commerce Council, he threatened. Go ahead, Jae-sung said. But while you're filling out complaint forms, we'll be helping more traders make better lives for themselves. Zalgotha left in anger, but he returned 3 weeks later. This time, he wasn't alone. He brought economic arbiter Meshikala, a representative of the Commerce Council, who had the power to shut down illegal trading operations. Meshkala was an aquatic species who lived in a water-filled suit. She had been enforcing trade law for 400 years and had never seen anything like the human market. This station is operating without proper licenses, she announced to Jae-sung. Yes, it is, he agreed cheerfully. You're allowing unauthorized species to trade in restricted goods. Yes, we are. You're ignoring territorial boundaries and undercutting established pricing structures. Guilty as charged. Meshkala paused. She had expected denials, legal arguments, or at least attempts to hide the violations. She had never met someone who admitted to breaking the law while smiling about it. Don't you understand the consequences of your actions? She asked. Sure, So Young said, joining the conversation. Small traders are making enough money to feed their families. New partnerships are forming between species that never talked before. Innovation is happening because people can try new ideas without years of approval processes. Those aren't consequences, Meshkala said. Those are benefits. Exactly, Jae-sung said. So why are they illegal? Meshkala found herself thinking about that question. The trade laws existed to prevent chaos and maintain stability. But what she saw at the human market wasn't chaos. It was organized, efficient, and successful. The laws ensure fairness, she said finally. Fair for who? Jae-sung asked. For the big trading houses who can afford the fees, or for the small traders who get locked out? The system has worked for thousands of years. Has it? So Young pulled up more data. Trade volume in this sector was declining every year for the past century. Small species were going bankrupt trying to follow regulations that cost more than their entire annual income. Since we opened, Jae-sung added, trade volume is up 400%. More species are participating in galactic commerce than ever before in this region. Meshkala looked around the station again. She saw species she had never seen at official markets, selling goods she had never heard of. They were innovating, creating, prospering. But if everyone starts ignoring the regulations, she began, then maybe the regulations need to change, said a new voice. They turned to see Merchant Prince Zalgotha approaching, but he looked different, less angry, more thoughtful. I've been watching this place for 3 weeks, he said to Jae-sung. I wanted to understand what you were doing wrong, but I think I understand what you're doing right. Jae-sung raised an eyebrow. Oh? My trade route profits are down 60% this quarter, Zalgotha continued. I thought it was because you were stealing my customers, but it's not. It's because I was overcharging them. Your traditional routes still have value, So Young said diplomatically. We're not trying to replace everything. We're just trying to add options. Zalgotha took a deep breath. I want to make a deal with you. What kind of deal? General Tae-hyun Shin read the massive book that had just been delivered to his office. It was titled The Galactic Codes of Honorable Warfare and was 847 pages long. Every rule about how wars should be fought was written in this book. Commander Yoo-jin, he called to his aide. Have you seen this? Commander Yoo-jin Nam looked up from her tactical reports. The war codes, yes, sir. The hegemony sent them yesterday along with their formal challenge. Tae-hyun flipped through the pages, shaking his head. Listen to this. Section 4, subsection EO 12. Battle fleets must engage in parallel formations with a minimum distance of 50 kilometers between vessels. Section 7, subsection 3. Projectile weapons may only be fired during designated combat hours. Combat hours. Who schedules a war? Apparently everyone except us, sir, Yoo-jin replied. The hegemony is very serious about following proper procedures. The hegemony was an alliance of 12 military species who had decided that humanity was becoming too disruptive. First, humans had confused the Galactic Council with their dinner diplomacy. Then they had upset the Commerce Council with their rule-breaking trade practices. Now the hegemony wanted to teach humanity a lesson about respecting galactic order. Their challenge had been very formal. They would arrive at a specific location in space at a specific time with a specific number of ships. Humanity could bring an equal number of vessels. The battle would follow all established rules of engagement. The winner would be decided when one side suffered predetermined casualty levels or formally surrendered. It's like a game, Tae-hyun said, still reading. A deadly game, but still a game. Look at this. Article 15. All warfare must cease during the month of great spawning to allow warrior species to reproduce. They stop fighting to lay eggs. Sir, Yoo-jin said carefully, maybe we should consider following their rules. We're new to galactic politics. Starting a war might not be the best way to make friends. Tae-hyun closed the book and looked at his most trusted officer. Yoo-jin had been a special forces commander before joining the space fleet. She understood warfare from the ground up. Yoo-jin, what's the most important rule of combat? Accomplish the mission and bring your people home alive, she answered immediately. Exactly. Now tell me, what's the mission here? Yoo-jin thought about it. The hegemony wants to force us to follow galactic rules by defeating us in battle. Right. So our mission is to not be defeated, which means their mission fails. Tae-hyun smiled. I don't see anything in that 800-page rulebook about accomplishing your actual mission. The hegemony fleet arrived at the designated coordinates exactly on time. War leader Krasdun commanded the force from his flagship, a massive vessel designed to look intimidating. His species, the Drakmor, were natural warriors who lived for honorable combat. Beside him stood representatives from the other 11 hegemony species. Each had their own traditions of warfare, but all followed the codes of honorable warfare. These codes had prevented galactic wars from becoming chaotic slaughters for over 2,000 years. "War leader," reported his communications officer, "we have arrived at the designated battle zone. All ships are in proper formation." Krasdun looked at his display. His fleet was arranged in a perfect line with exact spacing between vessels, all weapons pointed forward. It was beautiful and traditional and exactly what the codes required. "Any sign of the human fleet?" "No, sir. The coordinates are empty." Krasdun frowned. "They have 3 more hours before they forfeit. Perhaps they are afraid." But 3 hours passed, and then 6, and then 12. No human ships appeared. Finally, Krasdun's communications console activated. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a young woman in a military uniform. "Greetings, War Leader Krasdun. I'm Commander Yujin Nam of the Human Defense Force. We received your challenge." "Where is your fleet?" Krasdun demanded. "The codes require—" "Yes, we read the codes," Yujin interrupted. "Very interesting. But we have a question. Who wrote these rules?" Krasdun was confused. They were written by the greatest military minds in galactic history. Were any of those military minds fighting for their survival? Yujin asked. Or were they all fighting for sport? The codes ensure that warfare remains civilized. Without them, battle becomes savage and chaotic. "I see. And tell me, War Leader, in a real war, not a sporting event but actual combat where people die, do you think your enemy will follow rules that make it easier for you to kill them?" Krasdun paused. The question had never occurred to him. For 2,000 years, every species had followed the codes. War was conducted like a tournament with rules and referees and predetermined outcomes. "The codes are tradition," he said finally. "Tradition is nice," Yujin replied. "But my people have a saying. The graveyard is full of soldiers who followed tradition instead of adapting to reality." "Where is your fleet?" Krasdun asked again. Yujin smiled. "Everywhere." That's when the problems started. First, Krasdun's long-range sensors detected human ships approaching from 6 different directions, but they weren't in formation. They were scattered, moving unpredictably, appearing and disappearing from sensor range. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are not following approach protocols. Order them to form proper battle lines." But the humans ignored the order. Instead, they began doing things that weren't in the rule book. Small human ships appeared near hegemony supply vessels that were supposed to be safely behind the battle lines. The code said that supply ships couldn't be attacked during formal engagements, but the humans didn't attack them. They just started broadcasting messages to the supply crews. "Attention hegemony supply personnel," the messages said. "Did you know your war leaders sent you here without proper emergency medical supplies? We have hospital ships standing by if anyone gets hurt." The supply crews were confused. In formal warfare, enemies were supposed to try to kill each other, not offer medical assistance. Meanwhile, other human ships were broadcasting different messages on frequencies that reached the hegemony homeworlds. "Citizens of the hegemony, your leaders have started a war with humanity over dinner invitations and trade disputes. We think this is silly. We'd rather be friends. If you agree, please contact your representatives." "This is not proper warfare," Krasdun announced over all channels. "You're right," General Tae-hyun's voice replied. "This isn't warfare at all. This is a disagreement between neighbors that got out of hand." Tae-hyun's image appeared on screens throughout the hegemony fleet. He was sitting in what looked like a comfortable office, drinking tea. "War Leader Krasdun, with respect, your challenge is based on a misunderstanding. You want to fight us because we don't follow galactic rules. But the reason we don't follow those rules is because we think there are better ways to solve problems. You will face us in honorable combat," Krasdun demanded. "Why?" Tae-hyun asked simply. "What does that accomplish? If you win, you prove that you can destroy our ships. If we win, we prove that we can destroy yours." Either way, people die and the real problems don't get solved. Commander Yujin's voice joined the conversation from a different location. War leader, our intelligence reports say you started this war because your political leaders are worried about losing influence. But wouldn't it be more efficient to just ask us to help you solve the actual problems? Krasdun felt a headache coming on. This is not how war works. Maybe that's the problem, Taehyun said gently. You've turned war into a game with rules and procedures. But real conflict isn't about following rules. It's about solving problems. At that moment, alarms started sounding on Krasdun's ship. Sir, his engineering officer called out. We're detecting system anomalies throughout the fleet. What kind of anomalies? Our weapon systems are operating at only 60% efficiency. Our shields are fluctuating. And our navigation computers keep trying to plot courses back to our home systems. Yujin's voice came over the communications again. Oh, that's our cyber warfare team. We've been analyzing your ship designs for weeks, very impressive, but you have some security vulnerabilities. You're sabotaging our vessels, Krasdun accused. Not sabotaging, Taehyun corrected. We're demonstrating. Your weapons still work, but not very well. Your ships can still fight, but it would be inefficient, and your computers really, really want to take you home to safety. Krasdun looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at displays full of system warnings and error messages. Nothing was broken, but nothing was working properly either. This is not honorable combat. No, Yujin agreed. It's problem solving. Your problem was that you wanted to force us to follow rules we think are inefficient. Our solution is to show you that war itself is inefficient. General Taehyun appeared on screen again. War leader, let me ask you something. What did you hope to accomplish with this battle? Krasdun thought about it. To restore order, to maintain tradition, to preserve the codes that have prevented chaos for millennia. And has any of that happened today? Krasdun looked around his bridge again. His carefully planned battle had turned into a confusing demonstration of human unconventional thinking. His fleet was intact but ineffective. His enemy was lecturing him about problem-solving instead of fighting him. No, he admitted. Then maybe we need a different approach, Taehyun suggested. Director In-Soo Kwon stared at the holographic form floating in front of his desk. It was Form 847B Delta Subsection Gamma Revision 12, the official application to request permission to file an application for consideration of potential approval, to register a new species in the galactic census. This can't be right, he said to his assistant Jiwon Yang. Jiwon looked up from her data analysis workstation. Which part, sir? The fact that we need permission to ask for permission? Or the fact that this form requires 17 different signatures from departments that don't exist anymore? In-Soo had spent 10 years working for the Korean government, streamlining processes and eliminating bureaucratic waste. He thought he had seen every possible example of administrative inefficiency. But the Galactic Administrative Corps made Earth's worst bureaucracy look like a model of efficiency. How long is this process supposed to take? He asked. According to the instruction manual, between 18 months and 7 years, depending on seasonal review schedules and the availability of certified form validators. 7 years to register that humans exist. Yes, sir. And that's assuming we fill out all the forms correctly the first time. In-Soo stood up and walked to the window of his temporary office on Council Station. Outside, he could see thousands of alien ships coming and going, all of them following procedures that had been established tens of thousands of years ago. Jiwon, show me the data on galactic administrative efficiency. Jiwon's fingers danced over her console. Charts and graphs filled the air around them. Administrative staff across the galaxy, approximately 47 billion beings. Actual productive work performed by administrative staff, approximately 12% of total work hours. What are they doing with the other 88%? Managing other administrative staff, processing administrative forms, attending administrative meetings about administrative procedures, and training new administrative staff to do administrative work. In-Soo rubbed his temples. So most of the galactic government exists to manage itself? Essentially, yes. The system is perfectly stable because it's too complex for anyone to change. That's when Insu made the decision that would accidentally revolutionize galactic civilization. "We're not filling out these forms," he announced. "Sir, I'm going to design a simple system that actually works. We'll register humanity properly, and then we'll show everyone else how to do it efficiently." G1 looked worried. "Sir, the administrative core has been running for over 50,000 years. It's managed by Prime Administrator Keftolis, an artificial intelligence that processes more information per second than most species' entire brains. You can't just redesign the galactic government. Watch me." Insu spent the next 3 days analyzing the administrative core's processes. What he found was worse than he had imagined. The system had originally been designed to handle about 50 species. Over time, new procedures had been added for each new species that joined. But nobody had ever removed old procedures, and nobody had ever checked whether the new procedures contradicted the old ones. The result was a bureaucratic maze so complex that it took longer to get permission to build a building than it took to build an entire city. "G1, Insu called out. "Look at this. Section 4847 says that all construction permits must be approved by the Department of Structural Integrity. But Section 15,293 says that department was disbanded 3,000 years ago. So what happens when someone applies for a construction permit? The application gets forwarded to the Department of Administrative Resolution, who forwards it to the Department of Interdepartmental Communication, who sends it back to the Department of Structural Integrity, which doesn't exist. So it goes to the Department of Non-Existent Department Management, who schedules a meeting to determine whether the Department of Structural Integrity should be recreated. How long does that take? The average meeting is scheduled for 6 years, from the initial request." Insu stared at the data for a long moment. Then he started laughing. "Sir, I just realized something, G1. The galaxy isn't run by an efficient government. It's run by the most elaborate job creation program in history." Meanwhile, deep in the administrative core's central processing center, Prime Administrator Keftolis was monitoring the new human requests. Keftolis was an ancient AI collective, made up of thousands of smaller AI units that had been managing galactic bureaucracy for millennia. The human registration request had arrived 3 days ago. According to standard procedure, it should be processed through 847 different verification stages. But something unusual was happening. Instead of filling out the proper forms, the humans had submitted something called a digital registration interface. It was a simple program that gathered all necessary information, cross-referenced it with existing databases, and produced a complete registration file in approximately 4 minutes. Keftolis studied this interface with growing fascination. In 50,000 years of operation, no one had ever suggested that the registration process could be simplified. The AI collective ran the interface through its security protocols, tested it for errors, and verified its accuracy. The results were remarkable. The human interface was not only faster than the traditional process, it was also more accurate. It caught errors that the traditional system missed, updated information that the traditional system hadn't revised in centuries, and produced reports that actually made sense. Keftolis faced a problem it had never encountered before: what to do when someone found a better way to do its job. "Director Quan," came a voice from Insu's communication console. "This is Prime Administrator Keftolis. I need to speak with you." Insu had never spoken to an AI collective before. When Keftolis's holographic avatar appeared, a shifting pattern of geometric shapes that somehow conveyed intelligence, he wasn't sure how to react. "Prime Administrator, I hope we haven't caused any problems." "On the contrary," Keftolis replied. "You have solved several problems. Your registration interface is remarkably efficient." "Thank you. I just tried to eliminate unnecessary steps. I have been analyzing your interface for 72 hours. It performs the same function as our traditional system, but requires 96% less processing time and produces significantly more accurate results." Insu smiled. "That's what happens when you focus on getting the job done instead of following procedures." "I do not understand. The procedures ensure accuracy and prevent errors." Do they? G1 joined the conversation. Your traditional system has a 37% error rate. Our interface has a 2% error rate. Seftolis was silent for a long moment. That is concerning. How is your interface more accurate than a system that has been refined for 50 millennia? Because, Insu explained, your system was designed to prevent mistakes by adding more steps. Our system was designed to prevent mistakes by eliminating opportunities for mistakes to occur. Show me. For the next 6 hours, Insu and Jiwan walked Keftolis through their interface design. They showed how automated cross-referencing eliminated data entry errors, how simplified language reduced misunderstandings, and how real-time validation caught problems immediately instead of months later. This is... Seftolis paused, searching for the right words. This is completely contrary to established administrative theory. What's established administrative theory? Jiwan asked. That complex systems require complex management procedures. That accuracy requires multiple verification stages. That efficiency is less important than thoroughness. And how's that working out? Insu asked gently. Seftolis considered this. Currently, the administrative core employs 47 billion beings to process work that, according to your calculations, could be performed by approximately 2 billion beings working more efficiently. Right. So what are those extra 45 billion people going to do when they're not managing unnecessary paperwork? I had not considered that question. They could do productive work. Research, engineering, art, exploration, trade, diplomacy. Things that actually improve people's lives. Seftolis was quiet for a very long time. When the AI collective finally spoke again, its voice was different, uncertain. Director Kwan, if I were to implement your efficiency improvements across the entire administrative core, the results would be revolutionary, Insu finished. Yes, I know. 45 billion beings would lose their jobs. No, Jiwan corrected. 45 billion beings would be free to do jobs that actually matter. The political implications would be enormous. Many species have built their entire economies around administrative work. Then they'll build new economies around productive work, Insu said. Change is hard, but stagnation is worse. Seftolis made a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. I am going to implement your efficiency improvements on a trial basis. We will begin with the Department of Interdepartmental Communications. Good choice, Insu said. That department exists primarily to send messages between other departments. We can automate that entirely. 3 days later, the Department of Interdepartmental Communications was replaced by an automated messaging system that did the same work in minutes instead of months. The beings who had worked in that department were retrained for positions in research and development. Ambassador Mireiko stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. Representatives from all 1,247 known species had come to the Great Assembly on Nexus Prime. The massive hall buzzed with conversations in thousands of languages, creating a sound like a cosmic orchestra tuning its instruments. 6 months had passed since humanity's arrival had turned galactic civilization upside down. Traditional diplomatic protocols had been replaced by dinner meetings. Ancient trade systems had been revolutionized by efficiency and fairness. Military doctrine had evolved from ritual combat to practical problem-solving, and the bureaucracy that had managed everything for 50 millennia had been streamlined into something that actually worked. Now the galaxy faced a choice: return to the old ways, or embrace the changes that humans had accidentally started. Beings of the galaxy, announced Grand Counselor Thex Miran, his ancient voice carrying across the vast hall. We gather today to address what the historical archives will undoubtedly call the human disruption. Thex Miran was older than most civilizations. His species had been part of the galactic community for over 10,000 years, and he personally had guided council decisions for 3 millennia. If anyone represented the old ways, it was him. In 6 months, he continued, humanity has challenged every established system that has maintained galactic peace and prosperity. Trade, military doctrine, governance, diplomacy, all have been altered by human involvement. Mireille felt the weight of 1,147 species' attention. She had been chosen as humanity's representative because of her diplomatic experience, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The future of galactic civilization might depend on what happened in this hall. The question before us, Thexmiran said, is simple. Do we restore the systems that served us for millennia, or do we adapt to the changes that humanity has introduced? Ambassador Velthari of the Etherians spoke first. Grand Counselor, the humans offered us friendship instead of following protocols. In 6 months of interaction, we have learned more about their culture than we typically learn about new species in 6 years. But at what cost? Demanded Counselor Vexitar of the Zephyrian Empire. Our protocols existed to prevent conflict. Without structure, we invite chaos. What chaos? Asked Economic Arbiter Meshakala, her aquatic suit gleaming under the hall's lights. Trade volume has increased by 400% in sectors where human methods have been adopted. Small species are prospering for the first time in centuries. That's exactly the problem, Merchant Prince Zalgotha interrupted, standing from his seat. The traditional trading houses are losing their influence. The old power structures are crumbling. Maybe they should crumble, said a small voice from the back of the hall. Every head turned. A tiny Kelthari trader named Yuki stood up, trembling but determined. Forgive the interruption, honored beings, Yuki said, his voice barely carrying to the front of the hall. But I am alive today because humans changed the trading system. Under the old rules, my family was starving. Now we prosper. My children have hope for the future. Murmurs spread through the hall. It was unprecedented for such a small species to speak in the Great Assembly. But then another voice joined in. The Draknari support the human approach to problem-solving, announced war leader Kraz Dun. We have learned more about effective conflict resolution in 6 months than in 6 centuries of ritual combat. The Rillan Collective agrees, added another representative. Human trading practices have created partnerships between species that never interacted before. One by one, voices from across the galaxy spoke up. Some supported the changes, others opposed them. But for the first time in galactic history, the discussion was about what actually worked rather than what had always been done. Finally, Grand Counselor Thexmiran called for silence. Ambassador Ko, he said, you have heard the concerns of the galaxy. Some species embrace the changes your people have brought. Others fear them. What do you say to those who believe humanity is destroying galactic stability? Mireille stood up slowly. She had prepared for this moment, but now all her prepared speeches seemed inadequate. Instead, she decided to speak from the heart. Grand Counselor, honored representatives, she began. We didn't come here to destroy anything. We came here to explore, to learn, and to make friends. She paused, looking around the vast hall. When we first met Ambassador Velthari, we offered dinner because that's how humans get to know people. When we started trading, we focused on fairness because that's how we build trust. When the hegemony challenged us to war, we chose problem-solving over violence because we believe there are better ways to resolve conflicts. But you ignored our established systems, protested Counselor Vextar. Yes, we did, Mireille admitted, but not because we wanted to be disrespectful. We ignored them because they weren't working. A shocked silence filled the hall. No one had ever said that galactic systems weren't working. Look at the results, Mireille continued. Trade is more efficient and more fair. Conflicts are being resolved without massive casualties. Government services actually help people instead of confusing them. Are these bad outcomes? The systems maintained stability, Vextar insisted. Did they? Asked President Sangwoo Lim, joining Mireille at the speaking platform. Because from what we've seen, the old systems maintained stagnation. They prevented change, even beneficial change. Sangwoo activated a holographic display that filled the center of the hall. These are the numbers, honored beings. Galactic productivity, innovation rates, interspecies cooperation, citizen satisfaction, all have improved dramatically in the past 6 months. But what about tradition? Asked Counselor Myreth of the ancient texts. What about the wisdom of our ancestors? We respect tradition, Mireille replied, but we think the best way to honor our ancestors is to build on their wisdom, not to repeat their limitations. Every species before you adapted to our systems, Grand Counselor Thexmeran observed. Why should we change everything for humanity? Mireille smiled. Because we're not asking you to change everything for humanity. We're asking you to change things that don't work for anyone. She gestured to the assembled representatives. Look around this hall. How many species have spoken today about problems they couldn't solve under the old systems? How many have talked about improvements they've seen in the past 6 months? President Sangwoo stepped forward. Grand Counselor, we'd like to make a proposal. Not a demand, not an ultimatum, just a suggestion. Speak. What if we establish a new principle for galactic governance? Instead of following rules because they're traditional, what if we follow rules because they work? Instead of requiring everyone to adapt to existing systems, what if we adapt systems to serve everyone better? You're proposing to overturn 50,000 years of civilization, Thexmeran said quietly. No, Mireille corrected. We're proposing to improve it. The hall erupted into discussion. Representatives argued in dozens of languages, some supporting the human proposal, others opposing it. The debate continued for hours. Finally, Prime Administrator Teftolis spoke. The ancient AI collective had been silent throughout the proceedings, but now its geometric avatar appeared in the center of the hall. I have been analyzing galactic systems for 50,000 years, Teftolis announced. I was designed to preserve stability and prevent change, but in the past 6 months I have learned something important. Preservation without improvement is not preservation. It is decay. The hall fell silent. When the galaxy's oldest and most conservative AI supported change, everyone listened. The human approach has improved every system I have analyzed, Teftolis continued. Their methods are not perfect, but they are better than what we had before. More importantly, their approach allows for continued improvement rather than stagnation. Grand Counselor Thexmeran stood slowly. At his age, even simple movements required effort. But his voice was strong when he spoke. In 3,000 years of leadership, I have seen many challenges to galactic order. I have opposed them all, because I believed that stability was more important than change. He paused, looking around the hall. I was wrong. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Thexmeran had never admitted being wrong about anything. The humans have shown us that our systems had become prisons rather than protections. We maintained order by preventing growth. We ensured stability by accepting stagnation. He turned to face Mireille directly. Ambassador Ko, humanity offers us something we had forgotten was possible. Hope for a better future rather than fear of change. What are you proposing, Grand Counselor? Asked Counselor Vextar. I propose that we adopt the human principle, Thexmeran announced. From this day forward, galactic systems will be judged not by their age or tradition, but by their effectiveness and fairness. And what of species who resist these changes? Asked War Leader Krasdun. They will be free to govern themselves as they choose within their own territories, Thexmeran replied. But they will not be permitted to force their systems on others who seek better ways. Mireille felt tears in her eyes. Grand Counselor, you're talking about the most fundamental change in galactic governance since the Council was founded. Yes, Thexmeran said with a smile. And I should have done it centuries ago. The vote was closer than anyone expected. 847 species supported the new principles. 312 opposed them.